Pulled up beside him, blaring beside Merle. He said there's still some good in this world. He said the hag was a poet for the common man. Got him through his tour in Vietnam.
Hello and welcome to Telling It Like It Is, UGA Extensions and Southeast Georgia's newest source for local unbiased research-based information about Georgia's number one industry, agriculture. I know in the past few weeks, Savannah and I have failed to introduce ourselves, and we have just started our second season of this podcast. So I do want to take a second, and for anybody that's new, reintroduce. My name is Blake Carter. I'm the Effingham County Ag and Natural Resources Agent, and with me is my fellow co-host,
Savannah Tanner. I'm the County Extension Agent in Emanuel County.
Not a county coordinator?
Jesus.
I'm just kidding. Anyway, she's also county coordinator. If y'all want to, she's basically the queen of her county. Is basically what she's saying. No, I'm just kidding.
I'm the queen of everything.
yeah, that's what I have to deal with out here. Today we actually have a really, really cool episode because we're trying to do something a little different and start getting out with our community and our public and reaching out to some folks to join us on the podcast that aren't just internal agents and specialists, which, don't get me wrong, we were very appreciative of all those as well. But we do have somebody local in Effingham County. He's one of my row crop farmers. He's near my age. We're on the younger side, and we just kind of clicked when I got to Effingham. We became pretty good buddies, and he does something a little unique about him is he does have a full-time job selling crop insurance, used to be a crop insurance salesman / adjuster. And now he is an agribusiness consultant. So he's kind of doing some more of the teaching side. So I've asked him to kind of come on, and Savannah and I talked. And after all this past year with the hurricanes and the natural disasters and the crop loss, we thought it would be very timely to kind of talk about crop insurance a little bit. So I'm very pleased to have this next segment with Clayton Waller. So I'll go ahead and kind of shoot it over. We did some in the field recording, interviewing with Clayton. So we'll go ahead and turn it over to that part of the podcast, and we'll come back together in just a few minutes.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and switch gears over here. I'm really excited to have the guest with us today that's going to join us on this episode. We've been in the talks about this kind of doing this topic on here for a little while now, and I figured no better person to tell about crop insurance than a farmer and someone that has sold crop insurance before. So I've actually got one of our local farmers, Clayton Waller from Effingham County, with us today. Clayton, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and a little bit about your farming side and your insurance side?
Yes. So I am a farmer of Effingham County, row crops. Also farm a little bit in South Carolina as well. It's a family operation, third generation farmer actually. And I also have been in the crop insurance business over a decade. I guess my official title, you would say, is an agribusiness consultant. Mm-hmm. My consulting business is Savannah Valley Ag Solutions, and we do anything from crop insurance to FSA interpretations, all the way to equipment brokering as well. So we do a little bit of everything to try to help our customer base.
Now, one thing that I think is so unique from when it comes to selling anything to people, sometimes salesmen get a little bad rep for being sleazy, but I think from a row crop insurance perspective, you are a row crop farmer. I think that's super unique, and it comes with a little bit of a you've been in their shoes kind of mentality when it comes to that. How has the experience of you being a farmer really helped you in your crop insurance side of things?
Well, I would say my experience as a farmer, I have actually seen personally federal crop insurance. I've seen it work on my own farm. I've seen the value of it on my operation, my dad's operation over the years, and also too is I'm able to, with me having the boots on the ground approach, I'm able to use that knowledge for any updates that come up. I'm able to see how those programs, how they can relate in a real world situation. And then, even for, say, my neighbor's operations or, another operation in general, it certainly is provided avenues there to where I can, really show you the hands-on approach.
I feel like the trust level has to be pretty high. If you came to my farm and you're trying to sell me crop insurance, and you come and you tell me you're a farmer and you're experienced some of the same stuff I've experienced on my farm, I'm gonna be more likely to probably take your word for probably what the recommendations are, a little bit more than I would somebody that maybe not be in it. So I think that gives you a little bit of an edge in a way.
Well, and also my one thing that I've always stuck to as long as I've been in the business is I don't want to sell somebody anything that is not a good fit for their operation. Right. If I feel like it's something that is a good fit, then that's what I'm going to try to promote and try to educate on. If it's a program that I feel is, not going to be beneficial to someone or their operation, I'm not going to do the sleazy salesman approach of where I'm just trying to sell you more premium and make more commission. I'm going to tell you straight up, no, this you probably don't want to go down this path.
That's right. Well, I want to kind of dive into insurance a little bit and kind of just probably one of the best examples from this past year. It became a very hot topic after all the hurricanes and weather damage and stuff. So I felt like this would be good to kind of dive into and kind of get a little bit of an insider's perspective on crop insurance. What are some of the recommendations? What to think about? Why it's important? Because I realize when you go to USDA and you look up our officially reported acres, there's not as many officially reported acres. For crop insurance to be used from a farmer, do they have to report with the USDA their acres, or do they just have to report to you their acreage?
So to clarify on that, you do not by law have to certify any of your acres at USDA. It's not a required law. However, the reason why there are a fair amount of acres reported to USDA is because if you want to be eligible for any type of government assistance programs that is offered through the Farm Service Agency or NRCS, it is required to have it certified and registered. Yep. Now, however, with that being said, when it comes to the federal crop insurance program, we are required, if you intend on having your crops covered, we are required to report every acre and it be certified. That's how the ruling stands. But it is possible you do not have to, if you don't want to file or report any acres at the Farm Service Agency, you can still report it to the federal crop insurance provider, and you'll be insured that way.
Okay, good to know on that, because that was something that was people had called and asked the office. Now, can you explain? You kind of touched on it just then. So the federal crop insurance and private crop insurance are different policies, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So what are some of the different requirements between the two? So because what do they need to be able to be sure to think about if they're going to do the private insurance policies, thinking that way, or if they're wanting to make sure that they're doing the governmental ones?
Well, so one thing to keep in mind with private insurance policy, so there's only a limited amount of perils that a private crop insurance policy will cover. Typically, it's hail and then wind endorsements. There are a few other perils that are thrown into private products from certain companies, but the list is very limited. Also, keep in mind, too, that on a private crop insurance premium, there is whatever the premium that's quoted, that's what the farmer pays. There is no subsidized portion in that. If they quote you as $25 an acre to insure your crop privately, then you're going to pay $25 an acre. With the federal crop insurance program, if you qualify for premium subsidy, which most operations do, then it allows you to have a more affordable crop insurance premium, and also there are multiple perils that are covered, and it can be anything from wind, hail, hurricane damage, excessive wildlife pressure, insect damage, anything that is just a natural act of nature it will be insured under a multi-peril policy, federal crop.
Now, is that specific to your area? Because, down here we don't get a lot of snow, but we just got snow. So would snow be, if something happened there?
Yes. Yes. If there was some sort of provable damage out there that caused crop loss, then yes, that would be covered as well.
Now, tell me this. When it comes to what crop, getting a policy, what crops can be covered? Are there anything, or does it get a little kind of murky?
So it depends on what county and what state you're in and what region of the country. Pretty well all of your common commodities, your corn, your cotton, soybeans, peanuts, grain sorghum, tobacco, that's what's covered automatically in this part of the state. However, there are certain counties or certain areas where not all of those crops I just listed off that they have any insurability in. There is such things as you can do what they call a written agreement.
Gotcha.
And that will allow you to take data from a nearest county where federal crop insurance is provided on that crop, and then you could possibly get a policy written for your area, but that's under a specific circumstance. It's a lot of paperwork involved. It's a very rigorous process, but you can obtain coverage that way, possibly if RMA, regional office, will approve it.
Gotcha.
To do that.
Okay. Now, if somebody's trying to figure out, so you brought up a good point, regionality. If I was a grower and I'm determining, if I can get a certain crop insured, where would you recommend they go to get that information?
So I would recommend, first of all, RMA's website, which is rma.usda.gov. There's a lot of educational fact sheets and program information about just how the federal crop insurance works. Then also on that website, you can find out who your local crop insurance agent is. Every licensed crop insurance agent they have listed on a map across the country. So if you don't really know who your local agent is, you can find it on there. But typically, pretty well, most regions of a state or a certain country, there's somebody there that is federally licensed for crop insurance program.
Okay. When it comes to how important crop insurance is to a farmer, what would you say? How important do you think it is?
Well, I think it's a very important part, and the more that we go on into the future of American agriculture, it's going to be even more of a vital tool to have, because input costs are at an all-time high. With inflation rates like we are, everything is overvalued just compared to 2 years ago, let alone what it was 20 years ago. There's so much more risk at stake out here. And then also debatably, we have more extreme weather conditions than what we had just 2 decades ago. So I think that crop insurance is going to be a very vital role in the future of our agriculture and the sustainability as well of going through. So it's very important. It's definitely not anything that you want to just throw to the wayside or not really pay attention to, because stuff just costs too much today not to have some sort of a recourse on if all goes down.
Well, I agree with you 100%. I think it's getting harder and harder to farm, and you don't want that kind of risk over over you the whole time, the whole season, because something could go wrong. When it comes to, you talked about the high input costs, how does from year to year, when they're trying to set policy, to the certain payment, how are they accounting for inflation, and are they adjusting to try to help compensate from the higher input side for insurance purposes wise, or how does that get set? How do those numbers get run?
Well, so yes, so there are factors that RMA that they plug in to try to adapt to trends changing as far as input cost. But a lot of right now, the way that things are based, especially on your common crop policies like corn or cotton, it's based on like a typical revenue policy. It's based off of what commodities are trading. So right now, for example, currently we are in the southeast of what they call the discovery period for the guaranteed commodity prices. So that runs from January 15th through February 14th. We're right in the middle of it right now. Every day, every trading day on the Chicago Board of Trade, just take corn for example, that is being used right now on the daily closes of the board every day. They'll take a 30-day average of that trading period, and then that's where they will take that average price, and it will set for what the springtime guarantee, or the plant price, as we say in the industry, of how much will be guaranteed per bushel of corn. Currently, right now, just FYI, with the way that things are trading, we're trending around $4.61 a bushel on corn right now as we speak for Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, Alabama insurance prices.
Okay.
Just FYI.
Now, when we're talking insurance, crop insurance, or we're talking farming in general, there's this, I guess, this stigma around farming that there's this movement where people are getting into farming to get a tax write-off, and that's what they're there for. They're not necessarily there to actually take pride in being a farmer or farm. They're mostly doing it for a write-off. So there is a critique in terms of crop insurance there that there's people that exploit the system, right?
Yes.
Are there any methods or ways that from a crop insurance side that y'all are taking to try to help mitigate some of that, so it's not as easily taken advantage of by folks?
Well, yes. So every year there is updates done to the crop insurance program. Matter of fact, this is one industry where things change probably on average every 6 months as far as policy gets rewritten, it gets revised. And yes, just take the last 20 years, there have been so many changes in policy that have been made. We could go on for hours as far as different things that have been implemented, but yes, every year the integrity of the system tries to get protected more and more to try to weed out the fraudulent behavior that has happened. I think as far as the stigma you were referring to a second ago, a lot of what that is, and it's like this in the industry, there's always just a few bad apples that spoil the whole bunch.
That's right.
And you hear, and a lot of times the general public, they hear about the stories like these fraud stories out of different parts of the country, and maybe even certain states where there was rampant fraud, maybe 25 years ago. Since then, since there's been a verdict and there's been justice brought to that, they have implemented new rules or new things to prevent something like that from happening. But also at the same time, it's just like any form of law. You can write any kind of law and make something against the rules. And at the end of the day, there's still going to be a handful out there that's going to find the loopholes or try to find a way to do something, on the fraudulent side. And, like I say, it doesn't happen as often as it used to, but it's just like anything. There'll always be a rule breaker out there somewhere.
It's always one that ruins it for everybody else.
Of course.
Well, I've got a few more questions I kind of wanted to hit your opinion on here. The first being, if a farmer had never taken out crop insurance before, if they're new to it, how do they choose which policy to use? And because let me follow up with that. We have federal and the private side for policies. How do they? Is it good to have both? What would your advice be? For someone coming into it.
Well, the first thing that I would look at is if this was a brand new producer, the first question would be is what kind of crops are we talking? Yep. If we're talking common commodities, corn, soybeans, cotton, peanuts, then absolutely I would push toward the federal crop side.
Gotcha.
The reason why is because, like I say, you're going to get that subsidized premium.
Yep.
So it's going to be lower cost, and you're going to have a lot more perils that are out there covered. Now, if you were a specialty crop grower, that right off the bat, different produce crops, you're going to be kind of limited to what you could do. If there is maybe a private hail policy or a private crop insurance policy, which they call hail policies, if there was something available in that, I would definitely look into that route. Just know that it's going to be a more expensive type premium, but yet it's better than nothing. And then the only other thing that's really offered for specialty crop growers on the federal side is called whole farm revenue protection. Yep. It's actually turned out to be a pretty decent program for diversified operations and specialty crop producers that where they don't actually have like a specific federal crop policy for that. However, the disadvantage on that, if it wouldn't work if you were a brand new producer, because you've got to have 5 years worth of tax history to show to qualify for a whole farm policy. So with that being said, it would depend on your history and depend on the crop mix and, which way I would, recommend somebody look into.
How often do you talked about that 5-year average, so if they don't have that, right? Mm-hmm. So is it common for people to change policies after a certain amount of time? Is that commonplace for you to see that, or do you kind of just stick with one throughout your whole?
Typically, most producers, they pretty well stick with one type of policy. I have seen some that have diversified, and they've maybe even tried to carry both of multi-peril and a whole farm policy as like an umbrella. That was for an established grower. And once again, it's one of those things. This is a business that there's really not a one-size-fits-all. It really depends on the grower. It depends on the acres. It depends on...
It's a case-by-case.
That's right. It depends on their crop budgets, too, of how much coverage you should buy. But all of this that I'm naming off, all of this is very important and vital information that I can't stress enough of how important that is to really know these numbers when you're talking to your agent.
Well, that's a good point. So what are if I was going to call you for the first time and you needed information to start this process, what do I need to have prepared? What do I need to tell you about?
So what I would need to know from you to start out with is I would need to know your how your business is set up. So like in other words, what type of entity and what's going to be the name of a policy. Mm-hmm. And then we would need to know what your cropping plans are, what type of crops are we insuring, the county and the state that it's in. Matter of fact, if you have multiple counties that you're a producer in, you need to have separate policies for that.
Okay, I was going to add, what about different states? Because I know you farm in Effingham, Georgia, and in South Carolina.
Absolutely. If you've got 2 different states, then those need to be 2 separate policies as well. And there's not only is that just for rules and regulation purposes, but also too that will actually help hone in on better coverage per state, because if you farm, say you farm in Georgia, and then you farm in South Carolina, 20 miles or 30 miles, northwest of here, then, that would give you, basically that's 2 different environments you're working in. That could potentially be 2 different perils, and you would want to have your coverage pretty well separated from that regard to mitigate your risk better and hone in on a localized risk versus just all in a big pool.
Well, now that begs the question, and I kind of think I know the answer to this without me even asking, but I'm curious. So when you're in a county and you've got one side of the county that's super productive when it comes to agriculture, you've got good soil, good environment. The other side is not as good. I know you're going to have an average for the county, but the policies, should you have different policies depending on your good dirt versus your bad dirt, or how would you go about that? Do they take that into consideration?
So here's the thing. It's as far as your soil types go, it all really gets down into the mechanics of how many farm numbers you have and exactly what crops are you growing. Yep. There's 3 different unit structures, enterprise units, optional units, and basic units. Just real quick on a summary of how that works. Enterprise units is where they take all of your farm numbers, or common land units as they would say in the western part of the country, and they combine all of that coverage and liability together as one pool. However, if you go optional unit coverage, that's where you can take individual farm numbers and insure them as separately as their own unit. So therefore, now the premium on optional units is about 2 to 2.5 times more than it would be for enterprise. Okay. But the reason of that being is because you're actually getting a finer and more refined coverage locally to a farm or a farm number, as opposed to having, for example, if you had 1,000 acres of dry land corn in one county, if you went with enterprise units, then basically it's going to be insured as 1,000 acres in the county.
Yeah.
And you'd have to have a very large loss in order to be able to file a payable claim. However, if you were to go optional units on that 1,000 acres, let's say that 1,000 acres is divided up into 10 different farm numbers. Well, then you're breaking it down to where you've got about, just on average 100 acres apiece, relative, and insuring actually 100 acres here, 100 acres there, 100 acres here, and honing in and actually getting more bang for your buck as far as coverage.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
No, that makes total sense. When it comes to filing a claim, I got two more questions, and this is a big one. So, if there's an event that you think could have triggered it, or what would you tell a grower? What are the steps that they need to take, and then what do they, just some rules of thumb to make sure that they don't end up, in the woods?
Okay, well, the first thing is always to remember as a producer, damage for a claim must be reported within 72 hours of the initial discovery.
Okay.
So if a storm rolls through on an afternoon and it's brought a lot of wind, and you're afraid that the wind has damaged some things, or you've got a lot of excess rain came down at one time, and you suspect some flood damage will occur. Within 72 hours, you need to get out, check your fields, check your crops, and if you have any suspicion that you have any yield loss, go ahead and report it to your agent.
And now, when you say report, that just means call them, or do you need to take pictures and send to them? What you need to do?
It's always wise to take pictures. It's not a requirement, but it's always wise to have pictures. That's for sure. But at the very minimum, yes, contact your agent, and then report to them that, hey, I've got a potential claim situation. Then that agent, they have within 15 days of being notified, it is their requirement that they have to open a notice of loss. And then that notice of loss, which is reported to the insurance provider, that'll explain like the date of the damage, what is the farmer's intent, is he going to harvest it, is he planning on destroying it or grazing it, what they would like to do. And then from there, the insurance provider, they will assign an adjuster to that claim. And once an adjuster is assigned, then basically the agent and the producer themselves really don't have any responsibility up until the adjuster is ready to get with the producer and then sign off on the paperwork.
When, in your experience, when those claims are coming in, you're having to go out and kind of work with the producers to decide if it's a claim or not, if they should file or if they trigger it or not. You mentioned about whether the producer is going to harvest or not harvest or replant if that comes to that case. Are there rules and regulations that say you have to that they have to do one or the other? They have to harvest at a certain point, or they have to replant. And then if that is the case, as a crop insurance agent, when you go there, do y'all help kind of walk through producers what those kind of options are? Like, do you talk with them through that, or is it kind of truly on the farmer to kind of make that call? Like, do y'all give advice, or how does that work?
So as far as the agents are able and concerned, the agents up front, when we're notified of that there is a notice of loss that needs to be filed, we will try to go ahead and ask a few questions on the producer and what their intention is, and depending on what the answer is to that, we will try to explain to them what we can as far as where this is probably going to go, as far as the rules and regulations, how much loss it will take to actually be where they could potentially destroy it instead of taking it to harvest, because there are certain thresholds out there that will determine that. Now, however, with that being said, it really gets down more to the adjuster themselves of actually doing the calculation and seeing if that threshold is met. And then from there, usually the adjusters are the ones that get with the farmer and say, well, hey, you've made it past this threshold. We'll give you the consent to destroy this crop, or you haven't got to that certain threshold. You're really going to have to take this to harvest, to do. Or they may even give them the option of, if the farmer is really just very adamant about that they don't want to take it to harvest, then the adjuster can do what they call an in-field or on-site appraisal. and just say, okay, well, right now I've appraised this acre. This acre of corn, it's capable of producing, just say 50 bushels to the acre. Then that's what they will go towards your guarantee, and then pay you on the difference. And then but then the farmer has to sign off in that particular scenario that they want to destroy the crop. They can't go and run the combine in after it and go and still sell the corn. It's got to be bush hogged from there, or harrowed up, or let the cows, if they got cows and they want to graze it.
Do y'all
they can do that.
check behind them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Typically, when there is an on-site appraisal done that way, then yes, it is subject to being inspected.
All right, y'all heard that. All right, they do follow up. So
Yes.
there you go.
Yes.
Last question is more of just a personal one for you, because I know you're a farmer. You're also you've sold crop insurance in the past. What do you have a success story that you love, or that has got you to keep going in this field for the crop insurance side? Because you've been doing it for 12 years, you said, right?
Yes, right? That's right.
So has there been a story that's really just touched your heart, or really been like, man, that's why we're here. That's what we're doing it for.
I had a customer one time that a row crop guy. He had rolled off of about 3 bad years in a row. Just the area he was in, he'd just been getting slammed. If it wasn't the flood of the century one year, and then the next year it was more excessive rain, not necessarily a flood, but just bad rotten weather all around, a bad harvest season in the fall, and then the following year it followed up with a bad drought in the summer. But I can remember during that time period, I had stepped up and took on his policies, and we were able to, along with coupling the right policies together and upping the coverage in the right areas, we were able to hone in and get him better coverage, and he was able to persevere through the drought, especially after the 2 previous years of the opposite peril happening of too much rain and too much moisture. And he was able to carry on and, able to pay his operating notes off and go on. And the following year after that, what really was a motivational thing for me to keep going was the FSA office and that side of things. That was the year that they had come out with the what they called the WHIP Plus program. Yeah. And the WHIP program, I think it stood for I can't remember for the acronym what it was now, but anyway, it was basically I don't want to say like it was a disaster relief program, but it wasn't like your typical ad hoc disaster in the past. It was actually based off of your damage and then compared against what your crop insurance indemnities were. And anyway, with that being said, because of the more robust coverage that he had in the previous 2 years that paid him out, he was able to obtain a higher payment rate from the WHIP program because of the buy-up coverage that he had. They honored it because he was actually mitigating his risk higher. That's how the WHIP program was designed. It really actually rewarded producers that were more in the same boat, that were more willing to insure more risk than, say, somebody that was a cat level, which is the bare minimum coverage.
So the WHIP is Wildlife's and Hurricanes Indemnity Program?
Yes, program. That right? That's right. Okay. Yep, that's it. Okay. That's right.
Yeah, that's what I was looking up over here. So sorry.
Yep, that's right. And anyway, and like I say, with that being said, being that he had more buy-up coverage from the previous 2 years, he was able to get a higher rate at the way that the program was structured. So he was very appreciative of that. And what really hit me was one day, I still will remember, I was actually planting wheat on a cold morning here on my own farm. And I got a phone call from that producer, and he was almost, you could tell he was almost emotional. Mm-hmm. And he asked me, he said, Clayton, he said, I just got a good phone call. He said, from the Farm Service Agency. And I said, oh, well, that's good. Hope all is well. And he said, yeah, I just found out how much WHIP money I'm going to get. And anyway, he had told me how much it was, and it was basically the difference of him being able to pay out his operating note that he still owed about 40% of at that time, and then he was able to actually take a little bit more money and pay for a few other bills along the way, and he just called to tell me thank you, that he really appreciated the work I had done over the last couple of years, and that without the coverage that we had, he probably wouldn't have been able to qualify for the WIP payment, and he was very appreciative. And so stories like that, when they hit you, that's what at least for me, that's what motivated me to keep going and, just trying to do more, just do better at what I do and try to stay up with these things, because that was a fine story right there of somebody that I had gained a personal relationship with, and I knew it had helped their operation and just helped them personally in general and mentally as well. And that is a very big thing that we're dealing with in agriculture today too. Yep. It's just mental health.
I was going to say, when you can tell that when you mentioned emotional, it's not because he got paid, it's because the stress off his shoulders.
Yes.
I think people are oftentimes like, oh, yeah, there's another payment for a farmer. He's just happy he got some more money in his pocket. But I really want to stress that emotion's coming from just a release of that stress and that pressure that's been over, especially with the debt and financials being a big thing, with input costs being so high and everything. Man, that right there speaks volume to how important. When things are going good, it's going good. But when things go bad, that crop insurance is so important to be the difference between somebody making it or being out of business.
And I would say one more thing to add to that. I've heard so many times over the years of being in this business, I've heard the arguments of, well, my granddaddy didn't have crop insurance back when he farmed, and my dad, he only bought cat, so I don't think I really need to get out here and invest and look in it. Well, I can certainly understand the point of view on that. But also, too, we had to take in consideration that when Granddaddy was farming 40 plus years ago, the risks were not as high. Yep. We were living in an entirely different world. The value of the dollar went a lot further.
You actually had a farming profit market. You could farm and be profitable.
Yes, exactly. And then say like the next generation ahead of that, well, maybe cat, it's not much, but maybe it was still enough for the way that Dad was set up in farming at that time. A lot of things that we take for granted, and I say we as in just farmers take for granted in general, just go out under your equipment shed one day. And just walk around and just take a minute and just walk around and look at what you've got stored under your shed equipment-wise. And maybe you've already got some seed and chemical already, stockpiled for this coming year. Just start assigning a value, a monetary value to that. And when you look at where we were, 35, 40 years ago, most farms that you went on, you had a guy that had just a modest home. He had a pickup truck that didn't cost $6,000.
Yep.
And he had one pole barn with one tractor, small 2 to 4 row sized equipment up under it, and that was pretty well your typical southern farm. Well, today you look at what's under a shed now, and you've got not thousands, not hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars worth of equipment, just in assets alone on your place. And that's not including any of your other land assets and your actual crop that's standing in the field. Once again, the point is that there is so much more risk to mitigate today and hone in on. And I've also heard the excuse before too of, well, I don't need insurance because I invested in irrigation over the last 30 years.
Right.
Well, that's fine for the drought. It really is. That's great. But it's not always drought that gets you. If Hurricane Helene didn't prove that to us all here in the southeast,
even Debbie, or when was that hail that got you? Y'all's that wasn't even a main. That wasn't even a hurricane.
That was just a thunderstorm that popped up on a Sunday afternoon that came through.
Was it July?
In May.
May. It was May.
May. Yeah. And corn was barely even laid by.
That's right.
For the year, and it came a hailstorm that nobody had seen in this area in 100 years. And but the point is, once again on that, you just never know when some other peril besides drought is going to come in and get you. And also too, here's the thing that you can keep in mind, even if you're looking at it from a big perspective of self-insurance, there's a lot of, I've heard this argument over the years too about, well, I've built a nest egg. I've got savings. I've got an emergency account for if the big disaster happens. Okay, well that sounds good. But if you've been collecting on that, say if you took a 30-year period and instead of putting it toward the crop insurance premium, and you said, well, I'm just going to put it in an account and use that for the payout. All that sounds good, and conventional wisdom would tell you that sounds like a good idea. But with the cost of things today in 2025, that one bad thunderstorm that came through or that one bad tropical storm that came through, it could take your entire 30-year savings that you put in that account and it could drain it all overnight. And then you're looking at another 30 years of a lifetime to build that back up what you are.
Yeah.
Where if you had invested in the crop insurance, you wouldn't have to use that equity in your business to necessarily pay it out. Now, you would have some because there's always a deductible, just like in any insurance, and there's always a risk. You got to be willing to take some risk. But at the same time, it's also about mitigating your equity.
Yep.
There are so many guys out here that have farmed way too long and they have done way too hard of labor in their lives to just see it all just go away overnight, in my opinion. And when you get the big one that comes through, it's very, very hard to build back. And then you got to ask yourself, do I have another 30 years to build this back? Or will the next generation be building it back?
And just, you put it in perspective a little bit. You're talking about they've worked so hard and you just see it go away. It's kind of like if you're on the fence about crop insurance, the question I would pose is, do you have home insurance? Do you have life insurance? These are things you value so high. You're valuing farming every day if you're doing it full time, and even if you're a part-time farmer, it's still a good portion of your day and your time. If you're not valuing that enough to think maybe I should protect it, we might want to think about that. Because like if you've already protecting your other stuff and you've worked hard you're working hard for this to make sure you're protecting it.
A wise man told me one time that has made a living of selling life insurance for 60 years. Told me one time, he asked me, he says, what is your biggest asset? Well, I got to thinking about that thing and I thought, well, I don't know, that's hard to say. I got a lot of assets, of value. And the answer is the biggest asset that everybody has is the ability to get out and make a living. That is the biggest asset. And think about that when related to the farm. Most of us in general today, we have out here farming full time, we're out here making a livelihood out of it. Mm-hmm. That's our biggest asset we have, is the ability to go and take a seed, put it in the ground, pray for rain, pray for a good season, and pray for a successful harvest in the hopes that we made some money and that we can do it again because we love it. And also because we've got the world to feed and clothe out here.
And I like that comment you said to continue to do it again.
That's right.
To just farm enough to keep going.
That's right. To have the privilege of going again.
Because I don't know another industry that works like we do, where it's year to year. We're hoping this year can get us to next year.
That's right.
To keep going, and that's an every year mindset. Compared to other industries, that might not be the case.
Yeah.
I think that's a very good perspective of why it's so important, and like you said about the asset, I think that's a lot of times people, if you ask a farmer what their highest valued asset is, they might point to that $1 million cotton picker or something, but a lot of times, they forget that it's them, it's the people, it's the ability to work, it's the ability to farm, it's the farmer themselves and everything that comes along with it as that asset. And so you want to definitely do all you can to protect not just the crop and the business side, but that livelihood. You want to protect, and the crop insurance, I think, is something that is definitely, it's something to worth at least the conversation. If you've never thought about it or gone in that direction, I definitely think it's just at least worth having a conversation to see if it fits your farm and your business. Because like you said earlier, it's not a one size fits all. It can be personalized for that individual in that farm.
Yes.
Well, I appreciate your time, Clayton, to talk to us, because I just kind of wanted to see that other side of crop insurance and kind of just talk a little bit about it, what producers are could be thinking about and should be thinking about, Is there any important dates before we sign off this part of the show? Any important dates that people should be thinking about coming up?
Yeah, so coming up here, February 28th is the deadline to sign up and apply for crop insurance for your spring crops: corn, soybeans, cotton, peanuts, grain sorghum, tobacco. That's coming up here. It'll be here before you know it. And so yes, February 28th. If you haven't already got with your agent to look into renewing or purchasing crop insurance for the first time, I highly encourage you go ahead and get a jump on it and get there. And then just going on into the year after that, April the 14th. Production will be required to be turned in, which would be 2024's production, to update yield records. And then July the 15th, as always, will be the acreage reporting date to have everything reported and dates planted, things like that. So those are just some things to keep in mind coming up for the season. And highly encourage anybody, if they haven't really been carrying coverage, or if they haven't really looked into it in real depth, encourage everybody to do so. Take a little more time and hone in on some numbers. So
thank you for that, Clayton, and thank you again for being here. I do appreciate your insight. Thank you for working with us and working with Extension, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we certainly want to thank you, Clayton, for that information. This past year, 2024, has just been just awful in the realm of row crop production specifically, but also for our pecan guys. And so I do feel like any opportunity that we have to kind of talk about some of the opportunities in crop insurance and things like that is super important. That being said, we do have some upcoming events. February the 12th, which is tomorrow, we will have the corn short course. It got canceled during the snow and was rescheduled until tomorrow in Tifton. February the 18th through the 19th, we have the Georgia Conservation Tillage Meeting, again in Tifton. March the 13th, we have the Rural Stress Summit in Statesboro. And then we have March the 28th, which is a forestry field day down in Effingham County. Do also want to remember that your local county office may be having some of our row crop production meetings, so make sure you talk with your county extension agent to get to those and meet with some of our row crop specialists. I always enjoy those every year. They're just a wealth of knowledge. The presenters are at those and can certainly help you make day-to-day decisions on your row crop operations. But again, all of those will be posted on our social media platforms, which is Facebook, and as well as our Tilling It Like It Is website. So if you have more information, reach out, or need more information, reach out to us. We're glad to help you however. But that being said, we'll see you next time. And in the meantime, keep tilling it like it is.
Still some good in this world. He said the hag was a poet for the common man. Got him through his tour in Vietnam. He was the first dance to a brown-eyed girl, and there was still some good in this world.